Hello and welcome to today's episode of Finding the You in Mum. I'm Christine Bagley-Jones and I'm so delighted today to have my guest Liz Washington with us. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of her illustrious career so far, she is a journalist and freelance writer by trade. She has also created a number of businesses from their inception to a huge success, including her main project at the moment. She's the mother of 4 beautiful daughters, ranging in age from 16 to 23. So that's a lot of estrogen in the room, I imagine, quite a lot.
Totally.
She's also an alumni at Queensland University and the head of boards that have been very progressive and changing 130 years of tradition by implementing new procedures and ways to operate. Also, in your spare time, I'm aware that you are a ferocious advocate for animal rights, the rights of women, refugee, and just generally you're against cruelty, which I really love. So welcome, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
I also have to, full disclosure, Liz is a dear friend of mine and I feel very privileged not only to be able to interview her today, but to also share my life with her.
Oh, the feeling's mutual.
So let's just kick off.
Yes.
We've got a few questions, but I have invited you to go off script as much as you like because I know that you have lots of strong and interesting views that I think is perfect for the podcast, because the whole idea of it is for us to understand the dance between being a woman and being a mother. And I've always loved how inspiring you are, for me at least, how you straddle the two worlds well, but you definitely celebrate being a woman and keep me forever mindful of that relevance in all of its different elements.
Fantastic. Let's get started.
Let's get started. Okay, so the first question that you were excited to, well, before we go any further, tell me about how you arrived at being a mum. I always love to hear, was it planned, or is there like an interesting story to what led you to motherhood?
Yeah, well, motherhood chose me. So really, I had not intended on having children at all. It was an all or nothing thing for me. I always thought I'd either have 4 daughters, and that's because I loved Little Women. So I had this dream of either having 4 daughters or nothing. And part of me was really torn growing up as to whether or not I'd ever even be a mother. And I was headed towards a career, obviously, in journalism. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent and I wanted to work overseas. And I was really unsure that I'd ever be able to blend those two things together. So I was not confident that motherhood would come along, and I was okay if it didn't. And I was in my second year of university at UQ studying journalism, and I met someone who was about to leave to live in Sydney for the rest of their life and study in Sydney, and I went down there for Mardi Gras weekend to attend a party.
Yes.
And 6 weeks later, of course, I'm heading into uni, having a cigarette in the car and thinking this doesn't taste normal anymore. And that was because I was pregnant.
Wow.
And I was pregnant to this person who I didn't know very well, to be honest with you. I didn't actually understand who they were. And I certainly hadn't had any plans to be with them in the long term. And I was still living at home with my parents, who were conservative but very understanding people and very loving people. And that was a sliding door moment, probably the biggest sliding door moment in my life. So choosing to keep the pregnancy and then choosing to go with motherhood was pivotal for me.
It's just a gigantic segue. I'm just trying to fathom this young, vivacious woman with this belief that the world is my oyster, these lofty dreams that I'm going to be traveling and I'm going to be, journalism's a very sexy career path, and then suddenly you're knocked up.
Yeah.
And you're with someone who you don't really even know.
No, not
And
at all.
you're young.
Yeah.
Can I ask how young you were?
I was 20.
20.
Second year of uni.
A puppy. And
absolutely.
so, all right. And then you guys decided to give it a go?
Yeah, exactly. Just to find out. Well, I think we felt we owed it to ourselves and the person that we'd made to try.
Yeah.
And we both came from supportive families, so we had a lovely supportive backstop there for us. But also aware that it would involve a lot of sacrifice and a lot of changing and pivoting at this really important part of our lives. So it's interesting. I always say I went from adolescence into parenthood. I didn't have that junction
In
where I
between.
lived on my own, or that we lived together, or that I got to do the travel on my own, or any of those sorts of things. It was jumping from one to the next and not really having an identity as an adult until I was a parent, and that was that big formative jump from childhood into adulthood.
It's almost hard for me to conceive missing that bit, because for me that was where I did learn a lot about who I was. Those early 20s years, I mean, from what I can remember, I was out and about and pressed up against lots of different scenarios where I'd get to hone my understanding of who I was, my beliefs, my preferences, and even the many courtships that I had before choosing my partner. Each one informed me closer and closer to what I was looking for. And your journey is so completely different. Like you're like, hi, we're about to embark on this massive project together, having a baby. And all the while we're still growing up and we're trying to figure out how much we like each other.
I was very comfortable with the idea of doing it on my own because I had my family support. And I think that was the little bit of pressure that I took off at the time. I just said to him, I want you to continue your path, I'll continue mine. And if we do stay together, it will be because we want to be together, not because we've necessarily made a child and feel beholden to that. So that ability to have that flexibility gave us some breathing space to make it an autonomous decision, not a social decision that was cast upon us, which I'm very, very grateful for to this day.
And I think it's relevant to the story as well, because it's not like you're like, okay, we're having a baby and society says now we have to get married and we have to conform to this idea of compliance and sacrifice because that's just what you do. It was like, well, we're both part of this story and we'll see how it goes. One thing we do know is there's going to be this life, this baby, and we will have some sort of, I guess, crossover if we choose not to spend our lives together.
Yes.
And interestingly, I mean, spoiler alert, they're still together.
It worked. It did work.
It worked out.
It did.
And not only that, you went on to have 3 more girls.
We did, yeah. Yeah, we enjoyed her so much and we saw the benefit of having siblings for her that we just thought, let's strike while the iron's hot. I'm obviously going to have a pause in my plans. So while we're there, let's not drag it out any longer than we need to. So a bit perfunctory in it all. And he was studying as well, so we had not a cent to scratch together between the two of us. But it's amazing. You don't need a lot of money. You need a lot of love when they're little. It becomes more expensive when they're older, that's for sure.
Yes.
As time goes on, but I think having that there to begin with and that understanding that it was just us making a decision to move forward as a family and then add to it. It felt like I took a little bit of power back as well in that it became a conscious decision that parenthood wasn't something just cast upon me and I'd have to make do with it. I wanted to definitely make lemons out of lemonade.
Absolutely, and navigate it the way you wanted to, because a lot of people might have that first child and think, okay, well, that happened and now, I'm going to make sure that I correct my path, if you like. But you were like, well, now I have a new path and I'm going to furnish it differently.
Exactly.
And that's what you did. So what's a mantra or mindset that you embraced that helped you be able to balance your own identity and that of being a mum?
It's a good question. I have always come back to the idea within myself when I feel conflicted or challenged as a parent that we actually innately know what to do. It's in us. There are millennia of women who have come before us that have worked and had children, paid or unpaid. And we forget that. We forget that it's all there in our DNA. It's all there in our culture if we want to tap into it, and in our hearts as well.
Yes.
So I have found with those confounding moments in time, and there's plenty of them, and I think it gets harder as they get older.
I'd agree.
For sure, really hard at times, that I've always felt in the back of my mind, be still, take a moment, breathe, do your somatic therapy if that's what it requires, whatever it might be that helps you tap into that understanding that you've got this, have confidence in yourself. I had a phenomenal mother. My experience of being parented was so fortunate, and she always worked, and she also was just the most incredible parent that I could have wished for. And I think having that role modelled is an enormous benefit. So it showed me it can be done. Even now she's a professional and grandparenting 9 grandkids in our family. And I think that has given me an incredible confidence in my decision making around parenthood. And I know whatever I do, I'll have regrets. Or maybe not regrets, just at least think, wow, I might have done that
a
differently.
bit differently. But
Yeah.
you can still learn so much from those experiences.
That's okay.
And yes, I have the privilege of knowing your mum well.
Yeah.
And yes, she is, it's almost hard to describe Deb, isn't it? I mean, she's just such a warm, engaging, kind, curious woman.
Yeah.
And she's just a machine as well. Like
Yeah.
she was working, you were just saying to me recently during the pending possible cyclone Alfred, they needed her at work. And so she was there ready to sleep on some couch or on the floor.
Oh yeah, ready to drive through the cyclone to make sure that she'd be there for her patients. She works in healthcare.
Yeah.
In moments of need. So, I take my hat off to her. I'm always inspired by her. And it's interesting, I feel that she lacks a confidence in her parenting in a way. There's a few things where she's always said, I wish I did this differently, or I second guess myself a lot, and you tend to have more confidence. But I think that that comes from having a wonderful, supportive, safe upbringing and always feeling that stability. Sometimes then I think you're able then to be emboldened to move into parenthood in a more confident way.
But I also think the point you made before was really relevant, that you had this inner knowing that it's in our DNA as women, that whether your parent, your mother of origin
Yes.
was stellar, like your mum, or not, we have ancestry. We have so much history connected to our capacity to have offspring and to be able to deliver them safely to adulthood. And that bit you said before about, and we worked. So it's not this bizarre phenomenon that it was this dichotomous either or. You can, and I think should do both, whether it's paid or unpaid work, whether it's considered a vocation or just that concept of carving out and ensuring that there's a distinct entity being you that hasn't unfortunately melded so much into the role of motherhood that we get lost.
And do you think that there's an essence of the village that we've lost in that? I feel very cognizant that I built a village when my girls were young, whether I was living in Sydney or living in Brisbane. And that village has been pivotal in me having that collective wisdom that I can access, which is incredible. But then also that feeling of other women building me up, of saying, you're nailing it, you're doing so well, that verbal confidence, and seeing other women and how they balance things too. And realising, look, if you're living in a vacuum, you're going to judge yourself and you're going to be so hard on yourself. But if you're getting a little bit of everything from all the different walks of life around you, and that village around you, I think it builds a sense of confidence in your own decision, because you're around people who are trying to build you up as well.
You are, and you're also with people that you can trust.
Yes.
So if there is something that needs addressing or correction or taking a different perspective, you've created this network or village, if you like, where you can feel safe enough to ask the questions. And I know that you and I have shared, like our eldest children were what brought us together when they were really young, and I felt unsteady on my feet often. And it was nice to know that I had you and other key friends that I could lean into who didn't have the perfect answers, but were willing to sit with me while we muddled it out together.
Absolutely. And you walk away from those conversations and interactions, I think you do feel emboldened that you can handle this. And if you can't handle it, then there's people you can fall back on too. So
How did it feel being young amongst your cohort? Because I imagine going to the early school events, or just even, I don't know, even like the mothers groups, or however you might have interacted with other people. I am only guessing you were probably one of the younger ones.
Oh yes, some of them were my mum's age.
Yes.
So that was really interesting, but I didn't feel it. I think other people did. And I would get a lot of comments of, oh, you wouldn't know that because you're so young, or I don't know how you're doing that because you're so young, which I always found humorous, because historically women have bred from about the ages of 15, 16 years old and been able to have a healthy, surviving child. So I always felt it was really interesting that obviously in this time I was a good decade probably ahead of my cohort. And it was interesting that you bring that up. I have a really distinctive memory of, eventually I did get married. And the day after my wedding...
To the father of all the children.
Yes, I did, to my parents' delight as well. And I think it was the day after my wedding, and one of my guests at the wedding bumped into a school friend at a pub and said, oh, it just so happens I was at Liz's wedding yesterday. And my friend told me that this person that we'd gone to school with had said, oh, I heard about she'd had a baby and she's pregnant again, and it's such a shame because she did so well at school. She always had so much potential. It's really sad. And of course, my girlfriend, told me this in humour because she said it's really funny that there's this perception, this pity.
That she's sold out and now she's
life,
never going to live her potential.
I know, it's just her life's over basically, you can just pack up shop now. But of course it wasn't, it was just the beginning of a wonderful life, a wonderful experience, and a wonderful experience of parenting as well, as a thriving career. So it was interesting, you're working against, whether you're an older parent or a younger parent, against stigma. And it's a part of women are so hard on each other, they really are.
They really can be, and I guess that's part of what I'm hoping this podcast will serve to do, to just bring us all on the same team and realise that dichotomy, that sort of them and us, doesn't have to exist anywhere.
No.
We don't need to dine off gossip or trying to compare ourselves with each other because there's enough goodness for all of us to share. Can you share for me a passion that you've just secretly held on to that still might be a bit far off for now, but you've just got it tidy and in your pocket?
Yes, I haven't secretly held on to it, to be honest. I'm pretty vocal about everything. So I have happily shared that with people and also my children. I suppose it's the dream of being a foreign correspondent, as I would have loved to have had my path not diverged at that age of 20. So probably in the back of my mind, I always harbour that deep love still for news, and I quench that with making sure that I just tap into that at least twice a day. So I live vicariously through other foreign correspondents, and whether or not I find my way to that eventually, I'm not sure, but I'm still young, and even if I don't, I'm satisfied and comfortable with how life has evolved.
And if you were going to report from a country, what would be your... And don't say Italy, because I know you love Italy.
I love Italy. It'd be too easy.
It'd be too easy.
No, I think human rights abuses and war and conflict are the areas that I've got the greatest passion and interest in.
Yeah.
Not very sexy, not very light and exciting, but that would be where I would feel like I would be making the biggest contribution. And I can't, maybe not I can't, but I have chosen not to for now. And so that's why locally I feel a big need to contribute where I can.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me actually, because you are really an advocate for people that are in struggle. You are always turning dinner table conversations around to people that are experiencing some significant injustice or plight.
Yes.
And I've always admired that you have really clear and distinct views that you're not afraid to share. I'm always very conscious that we'll be at a dinner party together and you're comfortable to let the conversation wander into areas that are quite contentious, often highlighting the plight of people that are being exploited or minority groups and in the ways that they're suffering. So it makes sense that you have this journalist within you still, and that it's still very much talking about justice and advocacy and human rights. I hope that, because it's influenced us, like as a family and as your friend, greatly, because it keeps me very awake and alive to the topics that are out there right now and the things that are happening on a global level. I don't know if I would have been as interested if you weren't igniting that enthusiasm and that curiosity, but also sending me lots of news articles and things to read, which always keeps my mind nice and sharp. And you love a debate, and I love that about you.
Absolutely, and I think from a parenting perspective, our children's exposure at the moment is just, it's to another level. They are constantly online, they're constantly plugged into their devices, and they're getting news bites every 2 seconds, and it's very superficial. Their understanding of the world is really superficial.
Yes, and biased often, depending on what what platform and who's producing the material.
I'm really conscious that once upon a time our media was governed by a set of standards, that the news was generally sought through research and that you needed to substantiate every bit of news that you put out there, or you'd face either industry criticism or a potential legal suit. And now our kids are being exposed and they're building their idea of the world around just a few seconds on Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it is that they're receiving through that. So for me, the dinner table is one captured opportunity, and we have, even if I finish work at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, I am pedantic about us having dinner together. So they will wait until 9:30, 10 o'clock, very European, very Italian, to sit down at a home-cooked meal every evening, which is a ritual, it's a rule. And if three of them are in partnerships and relationships now, and if you're at home, you and your partner attend the dinner.
Yeah, and I love the
you
fact
talk.
you're passionate about that too, and you've
Yeah.
made that a steadfast commitment.
Yeah,
And I guess the dinner table becomes a place then, like a hub
Oh, yeah.
of information sharing and
Uncomfortable conversations too.
uncomfortable conversations.
Really important to have uncomfortable conversations with our kids.
Can you tell me more about that, the idea of
Yeah.
an uncomfortable conversation?
Well, teenagehood and early adolescence and early adulthood even, there's a lot of conversation around, yes, politics, because partners bring different politics and family backgrounds to the table. So I love debating with boyfriends
Yes.
about politics and learning their perspective as well, because I live in a bit of an echo chamber, as do they. So sharing those ideas is great, but then also having open conversations about sex and sexuality, about belief systems, about religion, ethics, health, body image, all of those things are ripe for fodder at our dinner table. And I think it creates an idea of, from that child's perspective, my mother isn't just a mother. She's got these ideas and beliefs and opinions, and hopefully it engages them with the world to say that, well, that's a role model for me as well. I want to be someone that can sit down and talk about anything, or at least have an idea about enough that I could hold a conversation at a dinner table and have a perspective to bring to the table. And everyone's perspective matters, not just one.
Tell me about a shocking truth about motherhood that, weren't prepared for, how it's impacted you, because I imagine motherhood just in general must have been a fairly startling experience because there was no lead up, there was no reading or preparation, it was just you were heading down one path. So tell me like a shocking truth potentially.
That you're not in control. And I struggle with that because I like control. I like, not in a, well, sometimes probably in a negative fashion if I'm honest with myself, but I like believing that I can galvanise change and cushion blows and all the rest. And I think like most people, come into parenthood and you get this baby and they are 100% dependent on you. There's just, you are the whole world to them. And the way that I think a lot of us manage that responsibility is by trying to tell ourselves, well, that's great, I've got this great responsibility and now I can control everything in this child's life, from their health,
Safe,
to supervise them. But the truth is, whether you are a free-range parent or a helicopter mother or a super mum or anything in between, whether you work out of the home or don't, you are absolutely not in control of so many things. And having 4 kids is a great social experiment. As you know, having a big family, you get the same genetic material and the same parenting environment and the same 2 parents and the same education and food and nutrition and all those things that we know feed into how a human is built. But they've got their own personalities. And then the world visits all of these different things on them. The world visits beautiful friendships and terrible friendships and bullying and assault and risk and violence and all these things that we're actually not in control of. And so what punches out the other end of this beautiful baby that you thought you could control its environment for and therefore create this recipe for a great childhood is totally outside of our control. For me, that's been probably the greatest shock, because even though it sounds so obvious, it's been psychologically the hardest thing for me to accept, that I can't protect, I can't control, and that a lot of this is going to end up probably very differently to what I envisaged, and that's okay, we'll work with whatever it takes.
And what do you do to stop from drowning in that worry or concern if you're someone that's attached to being able to ensure good outcomes?
Yes.
And I'd like to think that that's how we want to live our life, that we're conscious and directive and understanding of what we envisage to be a good scenario. And then when it is hard to digest the reality that this person that you love so much, that you've been given the responsibility to take care of, you can't ensure every aspect of their life is going to come out dreamy. And in fact, even their personalities and their choices. So it's not even what happens to them, it's the decisions that they are making that we won't be able to weigh in on. At any, even at every stage, there's going to be pushback, from the terrible twos right up until the final argument where it's like, I'm 18 now, Mum, you can't tell me anymore.
Yeah, it's really true. I think working out what is it that I can do to then support and supply resources, that is how I regain a sense of feeling like, okay, I'm still engaged in this, I'm still involved.
Yes.
But I've also had to have an immense amount of self-talk, an immense amount of self-growth around just being present and being comfortable just being present, rather than having a solution or having to change things or be effectively in control of the situation. There's an immense amount of discomfort for those of us who work in an industry where we're leaders, or, you know, we can make a decision, whether it's resourcing the company or hiring new people or changing the business plan or pivoting to a new environment or external factors that impact your business. But as a parent, sometimes you just have to sit in the agony of a really difficult moment in time where you do anything to change.
But you can't
what's
necessarily
happening,
do
but
it.
you can't.
I guess we can borrow a leaf out of Mel Robinson's Let Them book, where she celebrates the whole idea of just don't get tangled up wherever possible. Let them be, let it be, free yourself. And of course that pairs up with a lot of the psychology work that I do, cognitive behavioural therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, a lot of the family dynamic therapy that I do, very much encourages the individual to understand what's beyond their jurisdiction of influence, and just to be able to radically accept that and not hold on to this concept that I want to keep influencing, controlling, changing something that I can't, because that's painful, and it actually probably makes the damage even more, or whatever the adversity is doubled down on, if then your commentary, your frustration and your struggle then is templated on top of what's already maybe a tricky scenario for our young people.
It is, and it's attachment, isn't it? It's
Yes.
that you have those first 1 or 2 children you're practicing on.
Yes.
And when they hit the teen years and they start pulling away and becoming autonomous, there is that resistance to it as well, because we are attached to them and they're attached to us as well, and they need to break away and they need to make bad decisions in order to become whole human beings. Girls and their mothers especially, I think, can really struggle with that period, and the mum's identity is caught up in that.
Of course.
Totally
We don't want to
understandable.
look bad when our kids are doing dumb things.
But it also casts a mirror up against our own decisions in life, and the
Yes.
things we wish maybe we hadn't done or wish we had done, and it throws that back up at us as well. So I think on a deep level we're dealing with that. We're dealing with the fact that most white educated women living in privilege in Australia probably have some level of attachment disorder with their children,
Yes.
which comes with the privilege of being in that environment, and there's a lot to undo around that.
And just, let them be their little individual selves, and let them make their mistakes. And it's a tricky one. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of mother guilt. So what do you think of the idea of mother guilt? Do you think it's a thing? Do you think that we should be trying to dismantle it within our society? What's your thoughts on it?
It's really interesting. I had my first weekend away with my mother on our own 2 weekends ago. And my beautiful cousin as well joined us. And I say that's rare because my mum's life is in service of everyone else, and she doesn't know how to just be and hang out with people. To her, that's a bit of an indulgence that she can't cope with. So anyway, I managed to get her away for the weekend, and we spent a couple of days just being able to talk. But what really came up was this concept of guilt, almost this entrenched, she's not Catholic, but almost like that old-fashioned Catholic guilt that you hear about. And she has regrets about things she doesn't need to have regrets about at all, and she holds herself accountable for things that she doesn't need to. And I suppose my perspective has then probably been whittled a little bit by how I've seen her be too guilty about
Yes.
things that she should never ever hold herself responsible
So have you
for.
rebelled against the idea of...
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I have.
I love it. I love
I'm
it.
rebelling against that. And my approach is accountability is always better than guilt. So guilt is negative, it's purgatory, it's the idea of, it's static as well. What do you do with guilt? You just sit in it and you manifest in it.
You come to therapy.
Yeah, that's right.
You keep me in a job.
That as well. But I feel accountability is a far better way of looking at anything that maybe we would have done differently as a parent, and saying, I did that. I made that decision. It was the best decision I could make at the time. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was distracted and tired and overworked and all those other things. And I'm accountable for that. And I'm okay with being accountable for that. So what do I do about it? Is there anything I can do about it? Well, if I can't, let it go.
Yeah.
And if I can do something about it, if I can fix it now or I can remedy it, then let's do that. But guilt feels like it's not progressing anywhere.
It just feels like that dark cloud that you take with you, and it's a form of self-flagellation also, in my opinion. It's like if you're not growing from it, if you're not learning or making decisions to do differently or better next time, the guilt doesn't actually serve in a whole lot of effective ways. So I like the fact that you've watched it from your mum and thought, you're a beautiful woman, Deb, but I don't think that this guilt thing works. It's not the thing that powers your good decisions. It's not the thing that makes you a better person.
Yep.
I think
you don't need to sit in it. And I think if we can, as a society, and I guess this is probably the feminists coming out, but I think society has for a long time, and it still is geared very much towards making women feel guilty. We're guilty if we don't do something for ourselves. We're guilty if we do something for ourselves. We're guilty if we stay at home. We're guilty if we work. And it's just not that guilt construct in fatherhood in the same way. I'm not saying that there isn't guilt there, but at every turn, whether you want to look at social media or mainstream media or women's relationships with each other, relationships with our family or our children, a great way of controlling someone is making them feel guilty, making them feel bad.
And it can be done really subtly too.
Very insidious.
Very insidious. And I think that, our culture, there's lots of ways it gets gently bestowed upon us just with the little one-liners but then I guess it's also a choice what we want to take on. So even if the mother-in-law says something that's supposed to niggle at us, we get to choose whether we take it on and feel bad or decide to feel guilty because we're not offering a 3-course meal for dinner, for example, or whatever the topic be. And I love the idea of taking that power back and not only don't generate the guilt, but if the guilt is coming from an external source, you still get to decide whether you deflect it and opt for your own code of ethics.
Yes.
And when you let yourself down, which we always will, we're not perfect, we don't need to punish or remedy the situation with guilt. We can be more solution focused. We can be more compassionate. And we can simply say, I stuffed up. I could have done better. And we can be very confident that we are always in good company when it comes to stuffing up because we're human and that's just part of our MO.
We've spoken a bit before about women being hard on each other, and I think a lot of women are hard on other women because they're really hard on themselves. And I think when you release that anxiety around guilt and that purgatory, you then have more to give to other women as well and build them up and your children and your partner and I think there's a big flow-on effect. So
I think that's a really good point to make also because we do see women sometimes having negative commentary about other women and I think you've hit the nail on the head in that people who are comfortable with who they are, who feel confident and self-aware, they don't need to pick holes in other people's behaviour. They don't need to feel better about their decisions or the way they're showing up by making someone else feel less than. So I guess if you're hearing someone that's quick to judge others and maybe propagate that guilt concept, it could be a sign that they're struggling internally around their own self-esteem and worth, and this is a way of maybe trying to remedy their discomfort, and all they really need to do is spend a lot of time learning how to love and appreciate themselves.
Absolutely.
Maybe we've just solved a really big problem.
I think we've solved it all.
I think we have.
It's done.
Tell me a little bit about parts of yourself that your kids don't know about, and how do you go about introducing those elements of yourself to them as they grow?
I think I'm terrible at trying to conceal any part of myself to my children. Maybe it was because of my naivety being a bit younger, but I think I came at parenting from a really honest place because I never wanted my girls to turn around and go, gosh, I didn't know mum. I didn't know she was capable of that, or I didn't know that she even liked that. You hear about that when people pass away, and traditionally I think often women had these dark secrets that were hidden away, or dark interests that were hidden away from their family or society because it wasn't considered acceptable. I'm very much an open book for my kids, and that's been right from the start. Uncomfortable conversations sometimes when they get to that age where they start asking things and you think, oh God, I really wish I didn't have to tell you about that. Or I wish I didn't have to give you an honest answer. And obviously you make it age appropriate, but I've always been really, really open with them. So there's never been any great
Big reveal.
No.
It's been quite organic.
Which is lovely. And also I think making sure that they understand you've got interests outside of being a mum. And that might be something as simple as, I remember when they were little and I'd take them to the beach and they'd go, maybe we'd play in the ocean for a while, and then I'd want to read a book. And there's nothing worse than being in the middle of a good book and being interrupted 7 times by someone wanting to show you something, or can you do this with me? And it might sound cruel, but I'd say to them, if you were reading and really enjoying a TV show or a book and I interrupted you repeatedly, that would be unpleasant for you, wouldn't it? So I'm reading now. Unless you really need to come and get me, don't interrupt me.
Go play.
Go play.
Yeah.
And that, again, maybe attachment-wise, is just setting up that little bit of barrier of going, I love you more than anything else in the world, but my whole life doesn't have to revolve around you.
I love that. And just to be able to say, I have my interests and hobbies and I want you to always know about them. And I don't want it to be understood later, oh, actually, mum had a real range of things she enjoyed. Let them see throughout their whole lives that you incorporate those activities in your daily life.
Organically.
Yeah, that sounds great. So if your family was going to be a reality TV show, I love this question, what would it be? What would you name it?
Oh, Christine, I hate saying this because I haven't watched one episode of this show, but I have had a lot of people tell me that there's a similarity between our family and the Kardashians, which I think absolutely appalls me from what I know second-hand information about the show. But apparently that rings true to some people. People have actually said that to me. And I don't want you to validate it if it is true, please.
I haven't seen the Kardashians either, but if I had to extrapolate, I could see the parallels because your girls are vivacious and they're very confident about who they are. They're very sexually awake and they don't hide. So if I had to think about what made and has continued to make the Kardashians so successful, it'd be features like that. So let's see, that's the reason?
Yeah, maybe. Possibly so. I'd prefer to think of maybe Kardashians meet Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. That
Little
would be
Women.
probably when
I don't know,
Liz. When I watch that movie, and I do watch it every now and then, I bring it back out. That feels like the dynamic.
That
in my
wholesome
family
element
more.
of it all.
Well, there's wholesome, but there's debate and there's disagreement
Yes.
and there's the fraughtness of one wants to get married and be a homemaker and really loves the idea of being a wife, and the other one thinks that's so reductive and silly. And that fight of I want to be in a relationship, but I don't want to be in a relationship, and the lonesomeness in that reality for a lot of heterosexual women as well. So
I'd say women in general.
strong themes.
Yeah, strong themes. And so have you felt very lost or lonely during your journey as a mum?
Not often. I've got to be honest, and I think that's the village. I get back to what I said originally, that I've just been so fortunate to have a village, and I've got women around me that have never let me feel alone. I think if I didn't have them, then yes, the answer would be yes, but no, building the village and having authentic relationships with people where you can tell them terrible things, you can tell them great things, and you know they've got your back and you know that they'll keep it close to their chest.
Yeah.
I haven't actually ever had really raw moments of feeling completely alone.
Do you think, and this is just me hypothesising here, in part that could be because you did breed young while you were still at that age where generating friendships and prioritising friendships was very much alive. As we get older, it's harder to forge new friendships. We become more tight in our expectations or our willingness to be vulnerable. But when we're younger, I remember just being willing to just lean into love. Even if I didn't really know that person, I'd take a punt. And perhaps because that was where you were fashioning motherhood and still being a young adult, it was easier to form these big, strong bonds?
I'd never thought of it like that, but that's probably really true. I think one of my formative, most pivotal conversations I had in my life was with a very wise man once who said, if you were constructing a life like a jar of sand that's only comprised of a couple of colours, remember the old coloured sand jars, and you've only got a couple of segments of colours in there, you're going to be feeling very empty at some point. You've got to have layers and layers of it. And I was probably 19 years old when I got that little bit of wisdom, and it sounds really simple, but I visualise that jar of sand in my mid-40s now. I visualise it all the time thinking, where are my layers at? Have I got those layers in there?
Is it eclectic enough?
Am I investing enough in those? They don't just happen on their own. You've got to put effort in. You've got to nurture that garden in order to get it growing in all those different facets. So my marriage gives me a little bit, but it's definitely not my life. And I'm fortunate that I am married to someone who has always seen me as an autonomous human. So I've always been able to go away and say, I'm doing a girls' weekend, or I'm going out for dinner tonight, or I'm catching up with friends, and there's never been a sense of resentment around that.
No.
In fact, I think for him it's a necessity, and he encourages that for me, even though himself he doesn't see the need to have a lot of male friends.
No, but from what I've observed in terms of your marriage, I definitely see that your husband does clearly identify how much it means to you, and so he is excited by it. He's the one that says go and I'll pick you up, and it's quite lovely.
Yeah, and that's made me, I think, overall a far more well-supported mother and
not-
businesswoman too.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's not just motherhood, it's business that we talk about and all the other things.
It's all the things. And so in terms of like your relationships and your husband, in what ways, if you had to really pinpoint it, have they assisted you or facilitated or blocked your ability to maintain your individuality?
I think there is an obliterative component of motherhood for every woman for a period of time. And I think you accept that. But I don't think that it's dramatically changed my relationship. And I think it gets back to the age thing probably there. I never knew what it was like to live with him without having a baby in the house, which is really unusual. And I think that it hasn't impacted that. Probably what it's done is made me a nicer daughter. In terms of my relationship with my mother. I'm more understanding of her, how she wants to be loved. I often think that we love our mothers the way that we want to love them, or the way that they should want to be loved. This is what I've got
Yes.
to offer you and you should take it.
Because you should be lucky because, like, you know,
Yeah.
you're the mum and I'm the daughter.
Yeah.
And whatever you get is a bonus, right?
Yes,
Because,
yes.
you know, you're mum. You're not like an actual person.
You're
that,
not an autonomous human being. And what I've learnt through motherhood, and especially as my girls have moved into adulthood, is to really meet her where she needs me to be for her. And I feel, in terms of when I look back over my life or over her life when she's gone, I want to feel that for our relationship was a big pivotal realisation for me of whatever you need me to be, I will be in your life now, because that's what you deserve.
and that's what she's done for you.
I hope so, yeah, definitely that's the case. And then I hope as well that my girls are older, that they'll feel the same way towards me. I'm hoping they'll
Watch
a little
closely.
Bit of rub off a little.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, what you're saying here is authenticity. It's like to see me beyond the mother role and just as another human. Can we get on as friends? I mean, I always make the differentiation that there's nothing more precious than the role of mother in terms of that relationship. But there is room for that mother role to be flavoursome and include a deep, abiding bond that is a friendship as well, where there's trust and reciprocity, and it's not all about me being the nurturer, the mother, the provider, the thinking on behalf of you. It's lovely as your kids get older, or even at any age, I guess, to consider what my mum would like.
Yes.
What can I do for her as a
She
woman?
needs to be loved.
Yeah, it's a lovely concept.
It's a certain way. Interestingly enough, I'm at the point now where, as you would know, my children have fled the nest, which is great, or flown the coop, I should say, not fled the nest. That sounds rather sinister, doesn't it? But flown the coop, and that came about because as they moved into adulthood and had their partners and everyone living at home, and me working full-time, still really long hours, that there was still a childlike presence of them in the house. They weren't cohabiting as adults, even though they were. And this isn't in no way disparaging them, because I was exactly the same until I moved out of home, as was my husband. So we realised in order to maintain a healthy relationship with them where we weren't constantly coming home and then just criticising the whole time, that we'd need to say to them, look, either start living as an adult or maybe go and
Move out.
to put it nicely, move out.
Yeah.
But to make it their own choice, to say you've got the choice to stay, but it'll be under these circumstances, these are the boundaries, or go. And I'm actually really proud of them that they went, because they said, no, we agree with you. We actually think we do need to do that. And if we fall on our face, we know we've always got a soft place to fall back there with you again. So I went, I think at one point last year I had a household of 9 people that I was feeding and cooking and cleaning up after. And so the family shrunk. All 3 eldest moved out together with their partners into a share house together, which is lovely because they've got each other. And I'm sure they're having lots of fun. And so then, of course, my youngest, my 4th child, we were at home together. But it also made me sit with the knowledge that I've always had, but you don't feel it until you actually see it, of that one day they'll leave, one day they'll be gone, and it's you and your partner. And there has to be enough there to sustain the next decades of your life, because it will be decades together. And that requires an entire reframing of that relationship.
Was it a tricky adjustment? Because for you, it was a huge contrast. You weren't drip fed that transition. It was almost overnight, a cacophony of people and conversation. And every time I'd pop over, there was just so much activity. To literally overnight, they were somewhere else. And it was this peaceful, quiet house where you could feel the difference. So how was that for you?
Again, I think it's how you want to look at it. So I haven't been crying in the shower at night or into my pillow or feeling lonely because I'm busy. And I think that really helps. You know, the juncture of these moments in your life really matter. I think if I wasn't employed or I had really built my entire existence around them, then I would feel an immense loss. So I'm really grateful it's worked out in that way. But I also make sure that we've got plans through the week. So every second night someone's over.
Yes.
We do family dinners on Sunday just religiously, and the whole family's invited, including extended family and
Yes.
partners and all the rest, and sometimes partners' families come as well. And I really love that, and we build up to that, and we're planning what we're going to cook. And I work with 3 of my daughters, and so I'll say after work, at the end of the day, do you want to come back and we'll just make some dinner together, have a glass of wine and a bit of a chat? And what a privilege to be able to do that.
To have arrived at that space. I don't know, it sounds like the best of both worlds. And
It really is,
and
yeah.
if you think about it, you reap what you sow. You've been a brilliant mum, and you've shown them that it's desirable to be able to also be independent. So they haven't had that needy attachment. They were able to say, actually, you know what? I don't want to follow your rules.
Yes.
I'm going to go and make my own rules and see how that goes. And in all of that, I'll learn, make mistakes, but we'll forge a different relationship. And
Absolutely.
has that happened? Have you felt a positive shift or a shift in your relationship since they've moved out?
I have, but when they're back, it feels like they still live there, which is really lovely. But I think there's no negativity now. I mean, there's nothing for me to get angry about. There's
Yes.
nothing for me to feel resentment about. And a turning point for me was I work in an industry where I speak to hundreds of women, I'd say, every month. And I work with women. I work in a really female-dominated environment. And I just notice how often women my age are bothered and complain and talk about how difficult it is having adult children living at home that don't seem to respect the space or respect boundaries. And I didn't want to become someone who spent the next decade of my life, which I could totally see doing, because I've got a very open door. I love people living and staying and cohabiting. I love feeding people. But I could see myself becoming someone that would still be complaining in 10 years of the same thing I'm complaining about today.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no, that will make me boring.
But also such a brave move though, because when you said they're moving out and ultimately there's no hard feelings, but I don't want to keep living in an environment where I'm being subjugated and I'm having to do the lion's share of the planning, the thinking, the cleaning, and they're not pulling their weight and they're not willing to, and they had to make the decision, they made the choice, and we're all going to have to sit with how that lands.
Yes.
And at the time, because I know how much you love your kids, I love my kids, I was just like, oh, that seems a bit
Yes.
extreme. But I
Yes.
could see that it was like being fed by love. It was like our relationship is long term, and for us to be able to navigate this, we can't have this brooding resentment about petty domestics.
I found myself sending text messages when I get up in the morning of the things that were left out overnight, or in the morning when I came home from work, still whinging, complaining on text messages to them. And I thought, wow, if someone was to look at this, they think that was really actually quite a toxic relationship. So look, it was good putting it back on them and making it a choice. And they know they're always welcome to come home.
It was
and I'd love
empowering
them
for
to.
them too, because it wasn't like you kicked them out. You gave them choice, and I admire them too. Beautiful women that just thought, you know what, if I've got to do some cleaning, I'll do it on my own terms, the way I
Yes.
want to do it.
Doesn't that make sense as well? I mean,
does
we've
make
got
sense.
this extended childhood now, and I'm not certain that it makes people feel like they are fully formed adults for a really long time. And I think that we're seeing the results of that, even just with anxiety and resilience and all the rest, that maybe we're feeding a beast there by coddling them for too long.
I agree. And even when my son moved out for a period of time, and I missed him initially and then adjusted, and now he's back living with us, but he's a different version of himself.
Yes.
He's more mature. He's really conscious of what it takes to run a nice house, and he wants to be a contributor. He doesn't want to passively just have all this laid out for him, and he's grateful. So I was like, gosh, if I'd known when I was like tearfully waving him goodbye what I would be getting if I just trusted the process, it's way, way worth it. So tell me, maybe since the girls have moved out, or maybe always, what is a routine or something you do just for yourself to maintain that individuality, that sense that you're a woman separate from all these other titles?
I love that question because it's so important. I had a realisation very early on. I think my eldest child was 12 weeks old, and I was living in Sydney in a mouldy little apartment in Redfern. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't even need to get out of my pyjamas today. No one's going to see me. No one's going to know if I do my hair or my makeup or put a pair of shoes on, or no one would care. And to me, I was very, very aware in that moment that if I didn't do something about that, I'd probably very quickly slip into a feeling of listlessness and possibly even depression.
Yes.
And so I started a daily ritual that just involved getting up and getting dressed into something that made me feel good. And that meant not having a wardrobe full of things that I went, oh, that's my mum outfit, that's my stay-at-home outfit. That it was for me psychologically, and it's going to be something different for everyone. For some people it might be getting their nails done, but for me it was, I needed to be in an outfit where I felt if someone came over all of a sudden that I'd be like, oh yeah, damn, I'm looking good.
I love it.
And likewise, I would make sure I did my skincare routine. Even if it was a really rushed job, I made sure I did that every morning. And I did my hair and put a little bit of jewellery on or whatever it would be. And I probably looked like a right idiot because I'd be sitting in this little room all day. It was a tiny apartment. Not seeing anyone. Probably the only person that saw me was my little tiny baby and the checkout chick at Coles. But it was pivotal for me because I have not had one day since then where I haven't got up in the morning and done that. And even when I was, say, in hospital, having the other children and coming home, whether I returned to work really quickly or took a bit more time off, I would always do that before I got them ready in the morning. And I know people use that old thing of the life support system for yourself before you worry about the kid. But I really think that has been enormous for me because on the worst days, on the hardest days, and those harder parts of parenthood where you do feel sorry for yourself and you do feel like staying in your pajamas and wrapping yourself in a cocoon and going back to bed, there was another voice in my head that would just not have that. It was like, you are not allowed
Just
to do
at
that.
the very least do this. Yeah, and I think that's just so marvellous. I think even just that sort of like demarcation from I'm out of my pajamas.
Yes.
Even if I go put comfies on that I could sleep in if I wanted to, it's about starting the day and setting the tone and about that self-love. It's like I'm going to do my skincare, I'm going to make my hair feel good, and I'm going to present myself in a way that I can celebrate me.
Absolutely.
And then whatever else happens, happens.
And once I got them into a nice routine going to sleep at night, I added another little routine at the end of the day, which I recommend to all of my friends when they've had babies. And I always had a couple of candles in my bedroom and I would have my shower and then I'd have a ritual of, I'd light the candles, which makes it feel special even if it's not a special night at all. But there's just something atmospheric and relaxing about that. And I would, for me, do my little thing that fills up my cup, which is reading the news and engaging with that. And then a few minutes of meditation, nothing onerous, nothing difficult, a little bit of soft, gentle stretching to end the day because I do find I get a bit tense like this at work all day.
Yes.
And then to correct the posture. And then I find that I can also sleep better, but also the rest of the family started noticing that and they'd respect that time for me as well, which was really lovely. So if they did need to come in and ask a question or interrupt me, they'd wait until I'd had that moment in my day. And it literally takes minutes.
It does.
But it's pivotal.
It's symbolic.
It's symbolic and the body keeps the score. We know that every day if we do something with our bodies to love ourselves, our brains, bodies, whatever spiritually, whatever you want it to be, that you'll come back to that almost a bit like a drug at the end of every day.
Yeah, you look forward to it and it's that reset, isn't it? It's just that grounding, that back to yourself. You said before, I was interested, you work with hundreds of women over the course of a year or even a month by the sounds of it. Can you just tell us a little bit about some of the common threads in terms of like women and the mums and the difference between the two, like understanding how other people are interpreting the concept of being a mother? And are you seeing a rise in women realising the importance of their own separate identity?
They are. And I do recognise that, but I do think it's still in the face of a bit of stigma, which is a shame. So in my work, I see a lot of women in the cosmetic and plastic surgery field that are going through really big changes in their bodies after having children. That could be immediately after having children, a couple of years afterwards, or 20 or 30 years afterwards. But usually they come to me at a time where they've put everyone else first for a really big chapter of their lives. And having children and parenting has fundamentally changed their body structurally. So they've had physical changes to their body, not just mental and emotional changes.
I can back that one.
Yeah, which is
I'm
really
living it.
normal, really normal, really natural. And there shouldn't be any stigmatisation around any of that as well. But there comes a point where now, thanks to modern medicine, they feel a sense of permission to do something for themselves or to change the way they physically feel about their bodies. And some of these people, some women talk to me about not feeling comfortable being naked in front of their partners for years with the lights on, or having a quick shower before their partner comes in the room so they don't see them naked. And I think that because of having children, because of doing this amazing thing with their bodies that you just can't replicate in any other way, but it's also left them with things that they'd like to change. And then there's this guilt of saying, well, if I'm trying to change the signs of motherhood on my body, is that me denying motherhood and feeling some sense of shame over something that I shouldn't feel shameful about. And thankfully we're letting that sort of slip away a little tiny bit. I think that's changing. I don't know if you notice that as well in your field, but it's wonderful being part of that pivotal moment of them reclaiming something that they feel that they've lost or that they want to adjust. But I would also like to see that understanding socially about the undeniable link between our bodies and our sexuality and our physical state and our health, health being the most important part of all of that conversation, and our self-esteem and our identity as well, and that we shouldn't feel ashamed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I love the bit about that we shouldn't feel like we're stuck with the changes that have happened because we've given birth or carried a baby or breastfed or all the different things that comes with being a mum, not looking after ourselves often, not because we've consciously chosen that, just because we're time poor or broke or circumstance hasn't lent itself to that. And I feel like it's great, the idea that as soon as we're aware that we would like to do something for ourselves to feel better, whether that be aesthetic or whether it be something completely internal.
Yoga, whatever.
Whatever it is, I think it's a lovely idea, and it's a part of this whole concept of finding the UN mum, not just to make it just about quests and pursuits and just identity, but also about our body.
Yeah.
And about how our bodies change throughout life. It changes as we progress to perimenopause, post-menopause, the aging continues, and so does the evidence of it.
Yes.
But once we have a baby, it's not like we have to sign off on being sexy and vibrant and beautiful in our own definition of that. And I think it's sad to think that there'd become a time where a woman couldn't feel okay around being near and naked with the person that they've chosen to spend their life with.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's extremely common.
I think it is. And I don't want people to feel bad also if that happens to be the case, but I would definitely want to invite thinking about it in a different way, in a proactive way, so that if the thing that might be holding them back from the change is around not feeling they deserve it or feeling that once you're a mum, it's expected that we just stop caring about or wanting ourselves to be seen or enjoyed in a particular way. I want to move away from that.
I think it's also accepting that maybe we also need to change some social norms, that whether you want to change or you don't want to change, it's both okay. And that as women, again, we get back to that conundrum. There's either pressure, if you do something for yourself, then you're being selfish, and if you don't, then you're letting yourself go. We're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, really.
Yes.
And so what you've got to say is, well, stuff it. I don't care what you think. I am either going to revel in my body as it is or do something to make a change, just being okay with that.
Yes.
And eschewing those social norms that tell us that we should feel guilty in either direction.
Yeah, and in fact, it's exactly right. The changes that happen after motherhood could be, for a lot of people, perfectly fine as well. And I don't want that pressure where it's like, well, I have to look like I did before I had a baby, because that's ridiculous as
It'll
well.
never happen anyway.
Yeah, but it's like saying, I want to look like I did at another stage of my life. We're inevitably going to mature the way we are. And I'd love people just to find that sweet spot where they can find that contentment.
Absolutely.
Tell me a compliment that you could receive or have received from either your kids or someone else that really deeply resonated, but points to you as a woman, not as a mum necessarily.
I think it came very recently, actually, from one of my daughters that does not give away compliments very lightly, so it comes with a fair bit of weight. And she said to me, "You are the most determined and the most passionate person that I've ever met." And I thought, that's a lovely thing for a daughter to say about their mother, because that's what I'd like to be seen as. I'd like to be seen as perseverant and determined. Because, again, I don't know that that's always celebrated in
Women. Yes.
And then
Where it's called pig-headed and stubborn.
And pushy and a bit fiery and a bit over the top.
So I love the fact that you got, that was the compliment.
Yeah. And passionate as well. Which is equally as annoying for some people and women. But yeah, I just love that's what she saw, because if you're not determined or passionate in life, what are we here for?
That's right. Every day we have an opportunity to get there's so many things to be inspired by. Yeah. So who inspires you? What or who inspires you in life?
Probably gets back to my friendship group. And I think my children inspire me. The children are the inspiration, but the friendship group gets it done and they hold me to account. So I don't have light, fluffy friendships. I have a group of smart, serious women who you can still have fun with, but we just suck the marrow out of every minute that we have together when we can whittle away time for each other. And they really hold me to account. So recently I felt really stuck at professionally some decisions that I needed to make. And I wasn't making those decisions because I felt like they were too dependent upon other things happening that I couldn't control. And so I was sitting in that rut that we all find ourselves in, where we think something's going to have to change, but I really don't know what to do about it. And a great example of the inspiration, I had a quick breakfast catch up with one of my friends, and she's an amazing businesswoman and a dynamic mother as well. And she's just fabulous all round. And I really place a lot of credibility on what she says, and I trust her judgment. And she said, okay, what needs to change and why haven't you changed it? And then she said, we're going to make a plan right now and you're going to do the first step in the plan, or just bite off that first step.
That's wonderful.
And I did it. And annoyingly enough,
It worked.
I'm saying this, she followed me. I initially went away and went, oh, that was a bit overwhelming. I don't think I'll bite all that off. And then she SMS'd me a week later and said, so what have you done? I want to report. And so I reported back to her anyway. Of course, it worked. I've got an amazing outcome from it. It was exactly the right decision. And I'm so grateful that she inspired me and pushed me in that moment and held me to account and wasn't afraid of me telling her to bugger off and leave me alone.
I just want to wallow. I don't want to do
Just leave me in my rut.
Yeah, how wonderful. So it's the strong women in your life. It's the women that you've garnered as your nearest and dearest that actually inspire you and, keep you growing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
what a wonderful circumstance.
As a mother and a worker as well. And I think if you can nail that in your friendship group, again, choosing people who are authentic and have your best interests at heart, and being willing to let go of friendships that don't serve that purpose too.
Yeah, I think that's key. I often talk about there's only so many seats at the table.
Totally.
And you've got to be looking at who's sitting at that seat and make sure that it's helping you be the best person you can be, but you're also able to offer the same in them.
And we hope for that for our children, don't we? I always do that. You're the 5 closest people to you have the biggest impact on you, reflect who you are and what you want in your own life. And I just don't think we take that seriously enough when we're young. We feel like life will just be this endless quest and we'll get to that serious friendship group eventually. But if you can nail that when you're young,
then you've got it for life.
Yeah.
Yep. And conversely, if you can learn how not to spend time with women and people that don't inspire and make you feel good, that get rid of them, you will just not be weighed down by any sort of unnecessary toxicity.
And I'm more comfortable, I think, as I get older, saying no to social situations where I know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not because I think in any way that they're not valid or worthy outings or social situations, but I think we just feel we have to say yes to so much, and there's only so much time.
And life and time is precious. So finally, what is one small tip that you could give our audience that could help them in their quest to maintain their individuality and understand who they are in the context of motherhood?
I would whittle away that 3-minute ritual every day, whether it's at the beginning or the end of the day. I don't think that you can find the you in mum without having a routine that means whether you are totally time poor, you're sick, the child's sick, whatever else is going on in your life, the sky could be falling down, but you have to find that time for yourself every day. And that will give you the brain space to set yourself in on a pathway where you're considering what you need to fill up your cup, and then you can give to everyone else.
And I love that, because by doing it repetitiously, the benefit of that also is psychologically you'll start to pair that at 3 minutes or 5 minutes with feeling more relaxed, feeling more grounded. You'll condition yourself to look forward to it because you'll be arriving back to yourself each day. So thank you so much for today. I thoroughly enjoyed our little conversation together, Liz.
Thank you for having me.
I hope to have you back sometime.
Oh, I'd love that.